appetite for continuing on now. If this is your first time for joining us, well, welcome. We're happy to have you here with us. But we want to discuss more about, the prophecies of Daniel. We're in a time that we're seeing more and more of the predictions and of the prophets coming true in this end time. We clearly are in the end time. And the fact that we're doing this live streaming, there is things that are happening around the world that people are confined. We're losing our freedom, we are being restricted in what we do, but it is an opportunity for us to sort of come together in different ways. And we just hope that this message may help you, as it helps us too, as while it makes us come and study more again what it's about. Now, if you remember from last time, we were studying Daniel chapter 9, and we got up to about verse 25, and we were talking about how Daniel had this vision, and that was in chapter 8. He had this vision, and it explained about the ram and the he goat, but it also went into the 2300 days, and Daniel was not quite sure what this is all about, and he became very ill. And we understand, and it sort of starts to clearly talk about how he's ill in chapter 9 here, because he thought from the prophecy of Jeremiah that they were in the 70 years of the destruction of Jerusalem, and how the nation was totally destroyed when Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar took them over. And it was due to their sins, all their sins from all the times past. So now Daniel thinks they're getting close to the end of this time, and suddenly he gets this vision about 2300 days, and he didn't clearly understand, and he understands that the nation can still be sinful. And so he's very sick and felt, well, where are we now? And that brought him into that wonderful prayer that he had here, that prayer of supplication. So Gabriel was sent back again to go and explain to Daniel what the situation is. And he explained to him, he says, well, there is the 2300 days, and he explains what it's about, and he comes into the 70 weeks, is where we left off last time. So, as you know, I've got my brother Yvonne here, who's our pastor as well, and my brother Anthony here also, who's the elder in the church. Yeah. And together we're trying to pick this up, and we want to just sort of unpack it a bit, as the words are termed we use nowadays. We want to pull it open a little bit to understand more of the things. Now, as we understand here in verse 25, it sort of talks about how there was a commandment to restore. So I'm going to ask Anthony if you could just read verse 25 of Daniel 10, please.
Daniel 9?
Daniel 9, my mistake. Sorry.
Sure. Therefore know and understand that going forth from the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times.
So there was a going forth of a commandment. So what we wanted to see is, okay, with me, I like to know sort of the detail about these things. How do we know which commandment that was? So we know that in Ezra it talks about all of the decrees that happened, because it was during the Medes and the Persians' time, that rule. So we can go back into Ezra. So let's sort of see how much this has sort of come to us. So let's go and turn to Ezra chapter 1. Now Ezra chapter 1, it starts off here, and it talks about the original decree. Now, Yvonne, would you mind just reading chapter 1, verses 1 and 2? I think that is. Yeah.
Chapter 1, 1 and 2?
Yeah.
Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, it says, Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and put it also in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah.
Now, this is pretty clear that this is Cyrus speaking. He understood that the Lord, the God, the Creator, of Israel, of the world and of all the universe, and the God of Israel had commanded him. Now, what is it that really brought him to this point? There is something amazing about Cyrus. He was actually named by a prophet over 100 years before this. And he actually was telling him a message into the future, a message to Cyrus himself. So let's go and have a look at that. Where does that appear? You remember, Anthony, where it appears?
It's in Isaiah, the book of Isaiah.
Correct. It's in Isaiah, and it's in, if we go to Isaiah chapter 45, and if you could read for us verses 1 to 3. So we go to Isaiah chapter 45, and let's read verses 1 to 3. And I want you to really look at this and understand what it's saying. You know, you might have to read it again afterwards, but let's go through it quickly now. Thanks, Anthony.
Isaiah 45, 1 to 3. Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him, and I will loose the loins of kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. I will go before thee, and make the crooked places straight. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and cut in sunder the bars of iron. Verse 3. And I will give thee the treasures of darkness and hidden riches of secret places, that thou mayest know that I, the Lord, which call thee by thy name, am the God of Israel.
So here, this is a message to Cyrus the Great, over 100 years before he was born. Now, if you were this king, and you saw this in the prophecies that you know was written way before your time, what would it say to you? The fact that you've just gone and conquered the strongest kingdom on this planet, and you are now the king of the earth, and then you realise that this has been put there. Because remember, Babylon was an impregnable city. It had two major walls there. No one could get in. And we know that Belshazzar was very, very laid back. They're having a great party there. They didn't care about anyone trying to break in because they know no one could have got in there. But what does it say here in verse 2? It says, it's in verse 1, the end of verse 1, where it says, and to open the gate, but before him two leave gates, and the gates shall not be shut. These are the gates that were in the river that went through Babylon, because everything was locked up tight. So how did they get in there? Because this was impregnable. They actually diverted the water of the river so the armies could go through the actual river. But they had gates there. But the gates were left unlocked. Now, how did that happen? God made that happen. And this is told you over 100 years prior. So if Belshazzar had and his army and people had to read the scriptures, they would have probably been able to protect themselves, but they didn't. See, there's a message here for us. Let's read the word. It is showing us way ahead of time what we're going into, and it's the message for each one of us that follow the God of this universe. So I find that extremely interesting. You can see that he was committed, wasn't he? He was very committed that the God was speaking to him. So he was determined now to go ahead and set this decree of rebuilding Jerusalem. If we look now, if we go to, it continues on, if we look at in chapter 44, 28, it's Isaiah 44, verse 28. Do you want to read that, please, Yvonne?
Isaiah 44, verse 28.
Yeah.
And it says, that saith of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and shall perform all my pleasure. Even saying to Jerusalem, thou shalt be built, and to the temple, thy foundations shall be laid.
So therefore, he even told him what he was going to do and what was going to be involved. And we'll go a bit more into this as it goes on, because he says he's going to tell him he has to build the foundations of that. So now if we go back now back to Ezra, and we can pick up from that point where he was. And we know that in Ezra chapters 1 right through to 3, it talks about how Cyrus made the decree for them, all the people of Israel, to go back to Jerusalem, and all their priests and all the people, and they all had to prove themselves that they were of that blood. And some couldn't, but most of them could. And then they took all the vessels, all the gold vessels, the silver vessels, all the vessels of the temple, and everything went back. And it goes on right through, and it speaks of all the names, that the incredible detail here of everyone that had to go back. It's all listed here, and the names of the people, and who they related to, and what it was all about. It's quite incredible. And that's verses, that's chapters 2 and 3. It goes through there. Now we get to a point that they all go back there and they start to set this all up. They go and take the decree forward. So now we can say, well, this was the decree, that it was the rebuilding of the temple. But remember, what does it say back there in Daniel? In Daniel, what did it say? Let's just remind ourselves. Daniel chapter 9, verse 25. It says, "Know therefore, understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem." Now, to restore and build, okay, there's two things here. It is a complete thing. Nothing is put there unless it has a true meaning. So there is a lot involved here. So what was Jerusalem being totally restored and totally rebuilt under this commandment? Well, we know if we read on, there is a lot of opposition that was there. So we look in chapter 4, and we look at what it says here in chapter 4. Would you like to, Yvonne, would you please, because I know you'll have a spirit of prophecy we can back this up with as well.
What are we looking at?
So we're looking at chapter 4 of Ezra. Now, Yvonne, if you could just read from verses 1 right down through to verse, just 1 and 2 for this moment.
1 and 2. Now when the adversary of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord God of Israel, then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers, and said unto them, Let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither.
So here we have the people who live in this region as well. They're from the other side of the river. Mm-hmm. They are people that believe in the God of Israel, but there's something wrong. They came up to the Israelites and they said, look, let's build the church with you because we know, or your temple, because we know that this temple is a temple of the great God. So who are these people? Anthony, can you sort of explain who these people were, that they are so close to God but not close enough?
Okay. In Patriarchs and Prophets, in chapter 46, it reads, close by the Israelites who had set themselves the task of rebuilding the temple, dwelt in the Samaritans, a mixed race that had sprung up through the intermarriage of heathen colonists from the provinces of Assyria with the remnant of the 10 tribes which had been left in Samaria and Galilee. In later years, the Samaritans claimed to worship the true God, so they claimed to worship the true God. But in heart and practice, they were idolaters. It is true that they held that their idols were but to remind them of the living God, the ruler of the universe. Nevertheless, the people were proven to reverence graven images. So it goes on to say...
So they were breaking the second commandment.
They were. And we as it says here, that they mixed in with the tribes around them. And we can see the result of that. And I'll just keep reading here. During the period of the restoration, the Samaritans came to be known as the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, hearing that the children of the captivity build the temple unto the Lord God of Israel. They came to Zerubbabel. Well, do you want to explain more about that before I go on? Or?
No, keep going.
Zerubbabel, and to the chief of the fathers and expressed a desire to unite with them in its erection. Let us build with you, they proposed. And so, for we seek your God as you do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assur, which brought us up hither. But the privilege they asked was refused. Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our God. The leaders of Israel declared, but we ourselves together will build unto the Lord God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, has commanded us. And he quotes here Ezra 4, 1-3. Only a remnant had chosen to return. No, I won't go on then, Ralph. See?
Yeah, so I think, so I just would like to bring to Yvonne, I'd ask you, do you think that Zerubbabel and his cohorts, with the elders there, do you think they were being a bit harsh on these people? What would you do in a situation, they basically do all the same stuff as you, but there's just one little thing. There's just one little thing. They love their God, and so they just want something to remind them of. They might have a picture there, or might have a little statue or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with that? Surely, what's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of wrong with it. I mean, the thing is that the fact that, look, the Ten Commandments says that, you shall have no other gods before me, right? Even it's just a little picture that that you hold dearly, But then in the same time, you go to a temple and do your worship there. I mean, it's almost like you're 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in the church. In God's eyes, you're basically what? You're 100% in the world, because you cannot put 1 foot here and 1 foot there. You're either in or you're either out. So for Zerubbabel, for Ezra and the children of Israel at that time, they see this compromise and they don't want to get engaged in that compromise, and so they say, no, we are going to do this. Do your own thing, but we will do our own thing. I mean, this is the commission for us to rebuild Jerusalem. It was destroyed because of our sin. Now we have to build it up, and we don't want sin to mingle with it, because having idol is definitely sin.
Well, I do have something to read.
Yep.
But it says here in Prophets and Kings, regarding the relation that Israel should sustain to surrounding people, the Lord had declared through Moses, this is what he said, thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them, neither shalt thou make marriages with them, for they will turn away thy sons from following me. They may serve other gods, so will the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and destroy thee suddenly. Thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God, and the Lord has chosen thee to be a peculiar people unto himself, above the nations that are upon the earth. And that's found in Deuteronomy 7:2-4 and 14:2. So God did not want God's people to mix with the heathen. Why? Because the end result would be that they would end up worshipping heathen gods, and their children would be lost, and God would, be against them. So that's a really good reason. And the Bible does say that we should not be unequally yoked. If we're going to marry someone, we should marry someone in our own. A Seventh-day Adventist. If you're a Seventh-day Adventist, you're an Israelite. You should marry an Israelite.
God comes first. God comes first in everything.
Absolutely.
In our family life, we follow God. Then it's back to our spouse and then to our children and so on. So, and it's the only way that it works. Otherwise, you're compromising the commandments of God and where it's at. We have to follow God in His purity, His righteousness. We have no righteousness. So if we level out with our partners or something like that, then it doesn't work, because we have that weakness. We cannot go beyond everything that comes against us that is evil in this world. So we have a situation now that these people think they're so close to God, but they're not there. They have the ability, I'm sure Zerubbabel would have said, if you give up your idols, any of you individually, if you give up your idols and come in, he would have said, yeah, okay, join us.
Yeah.
You can come back into the fold and go through whatever it is there that you are surrendering to God. I'm sure he would have said, okay, wouldn't he? It's a situation as it is now.
I mean, it's safe to assume because the reason why he didn't want them to be involved in it because of their practices.
Yeah.
And like God wants us to, when we worship Him, He wants us to be fully committed to Him. That's why it's really hard. That's why it's really hard to follow God and at the same time to follow the world. It doesn't work that way.
There's a clear, distinct line.
Yes, definitely.
But the outcome is, according to what we read, you'll be lost.
Yes.
And God does, He's not willing that any should be lost, really.
Yes. Yes.
So.
But we can draw it to present truth.
Yeah.
We can only look at people in the world today, and under this COVID-19 situation, a lot of people are in fear.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? They have no basis of hope. The way they've lived their life is they've been probably affluent enough, particularly in first world countries, that you're comfortable, you can go home, you do your own thing, as long as you get your work next day, you've got a good job, you earn good money, you buy what you want, you go have all your entertainment, you have all the things that you want, you have a comfortable life, and everything's happy. Now we're in a situation that's totally compromised. You can't go out. Doesn't matter how much money you got. You can't go and visit people. You're stuck in your home. You're very restricted. You can't travel overseas. You can't do any of those things. You can't go skiing because they've closed down the ski fields. You can't do any of those things that brought happiness in your life. So what does that mean? Does that mean the life as we know it today has changed for eternity? It's certainly changed forever on this earth. Things may get some more normality to it, but it's never going to be the same. We've never been in this situation before. So those people who don't have God in their lives, and when you know God, you know that there is a power beyond all of this who is saving us from this horrible destruction of sin. And this is what this is all about. There's a process that God gives us. In His mercy, He gives us that time to understand what that is, to make it clear that there are two paths and that we can make that choice. And the same thing is here too. So the clear distinction between those who worship the idols, yet they think they're so close to God. Now we have some parallels in Christianity today. There is a bit of that. And those who are purely as it is, as God has placed it in the start. So here we are. They're going to build this temple. Now I think that the Samaritans, they wanted to take the temple for themselves because they were pretty upset. They were upset that they were rejected from this situation. And if we go on it.
Well, the thing is that this is one way that the devil has worked through the Samaritans, because first of all, when Cyrus realized that he needed to do this for he was prophesied by God in Isaiah, what we read about him, and he said, okay, now you can go and rebuild Jerusalem, which is the first decree. The first decree, right? The first decree, and while they were building, definitely the enemy doesn't want this Jerusalem to be rebuilt. He knows what's going to happen if it's rebuilt, and so he uses people to lure, like what Anthony was saying, that if they had get involved in building Jerusalem, then it's taking one step to compromise, and once you compromise, then it will lead you to another compromise, which will lead you, at the end of it, is sin. So Satan is trying to stop the progress in rebuilding Jerusalem and restoring Jerusalem by the decree of Cyrus, so that God's people we cannot move forward.
So let's sort of move on and where it's sort of saying here. So let's read just verse 4. Chapter 4. So this is Ezra chapter 4, verse 4. And I want you to read through 4 and 5. If you could do that for me, Yvonne, please.
Okay. Then the people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building and hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus, king of Persia, even until the reign of Darius, king of Persia.
So they were pretty upset. And so they said, well, if you're not going to let us in, we're not going to let you have a temple. That was their idea. So that's Satan working through them,
Yes.
obviously. So they went there and they made it very, very difficult for them. You know, hard to buy implements, hard to buy the materials, stop things from happening. You know, if anyone who was delivering something, they may have derailed them or whatever. Whatever you can imagine in that time that they could have done to try and stop it or slow them down, they did it. And that's what happened. Is the work continued, but it slowed right down, that it virtually was just like almost kicking stones around. But, you know, it was really an issue that the initial impetus. So what happened under this decree, it allowed everything to transfer from Babylon to Jerusalem in preparation for the rebuilding of the temple. So they had all the instruments there, they had all the people there, they had the blessing from Cyrus to go ahead and do it, and the money and everything to go ahead, and they started to do the work, but then this happened. So it sort of slowed down. So what have you got to add there, Anthony, for us?
Well, I've got something on the spirit of prophecy. It says, by false reports they aroused suspicion in the minds, easily led to suspect. But for many years the powers of evil were held in check, and the people of Judea had liberty to continue their work, while Satan, striving to influence the highest power in the kingdom of Medo-Persia to show disfavour to God's people, angels worked on behalf of the exiles. The controversy was one in which all heaven was interested. Through the prophet Daniel we are given a glimpse of this mighty struggle between the forces of good, forces of evil. For 3 weeks Gabriel wrestled with the powers of darkness, seeking to counteract the influences of the work on the mind of Cyrus before the contest closed. Christ himself came to Gabriel's aid, the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood. Well, I won't go into that, but we can see there was this behind the scenes as
there was a battle going on.
There was a battle, as Pastor Ron was saying. You know, it looked like a simple thing, the Samaritans coming to them saying, hey, we want to help you, but really it was Satan's trying to work to stop the rebuilding of Jerusalem.
Because if the Samaritans got into there, what would have happened? You know, it would have become more wishy-washy. They may have built something, but it certainly wasn't the proper thing that as God wanted. And we saw all the detail. If you read there, you know, Ezra right from chapter 1 right through, you will see the detail that was listed there on what was to happen. And Cyrus, even it was proclaimed back in Isaiah how he had to build the foundation and get the foundation going. But did they get the foundation happening? Well, they didn't quite get there. So this is, so we know Cyrus is in around 537 BC. And then we've got Darius who's running around it was happening about 520 BC was when he made his decree. So we need to sort of just fast forward a little bit here, and we continue on and pick up the story here at the time when Darius was in rule. And the Samaritans,
Ezra 6.
They wanted to get into the situation of saying, you know, let's try and stop these people again, because the work hadn't stopped. They were still going. They were still doing things. So we know that these Samaritans went on and went up to the builders who were building it there, and they said, well, what right do you have? How can you go and... we're getting so excited here. There's so much here to talk about. We need to get some more into this. So we're trying to get into the Samaritans here came along, and they said, if you read in chapter 5, and it goes along, and they sent a letter to Darius the king. So we need to read just here in chapter 5. Yvonne, if you can just read chapter 5 from verse... you just read from verse 3. Just keep reading for a bit. Yeah.
You want me to read verse 3?
Verse 3 right through to... just go for a few verses there. It sort of sets up the story here. What I'm trying to set up is that they came and they started questioning these people who were building.
Okay. Verse 3 of Ezra 5. At the same time came to them Tatnai, governor of this side of the river, and Shethar-Bonzai, Bozni, and their companions, and said thus unto them, Who hath commanded you to build this house, and to make up this wall? In verse 4, Then said we unto them after this manner, What are the names of the men that make this building? But the eye of God was upon the elders of the Jews, that they could not cause them to cease, till the matter came to Darius. And then they returned answer by letter concerning this matter. Do you want me to keep reading, or?
Yeah, so what it says, so they've come up to this point, and they're going to send a letter to Darius, but basically they spoke and they asked them, what right do you have? So what we might do is we'll just pick it up there. Let's pick up from, Anthony, can you pick up from chapter 5, verse 9, and I just want you to read through, as we come through, right through to verse 15. Finish for end of 14, sorry.
Verse 9 in Ezra 5. Then asked we those elders, and said unto them, Thus, who commanded you to build this house and to make these walls? We asked their names also to certify thee, that we might write the names of the men that were the chief of them. And thus they returned, thus they returned us answering, saying, We are the servants of God of heaven and earth, and built the house that was built these many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and set up. But after that our fathers had provoked God, the God of heaven, unto wrath, to give them unto the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away unto Babylon.
Just stop there a sec. So we can see here now they're explaining the history of the transgression of their people, and that how they were destroyed by Babylon. So continue.
But the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same king Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God. And the vessels of gold and silver in the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and brought them unto the temple of Babylon, those did Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon, and they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar.
Okay, so we can stop there. So basically you get the gist that they are reiterating the whole story from the beginning, why they went off to Babylon, how they came out after 70 years, how then Cyrus gave the decree for them to go forward and rebuild Jerusalem. And that's that's their standing, so they can show that's their authority. So now the Samaritans come and they write their letter, and then if you read from verse 17, what do the Samaritans say now?
Now therefore, if it seem good to the king, let there be search made in the king's treasure house, which is there at Babylon, whether it be so, that the decree was made of Cyrus the king to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send his pleasure to us concerning this matter.
So these people obviously, they're saying, okay, see if it's really true. Is this really true? Is this what happened? So
Yes.
what happened then, Yvonne? And so if we go into chapter 6, that leads on, and what does it say in verse 1 there?
Then Darius the king made a decree, and search was made in the house of the rolls, where the treasures were laid up in Babylon.
And verse 2?
And there was found at Achmetha, in the palace that is in the province of the Medes, a roll, and therein was a record thus written.
Yeah, so there it leads on from there, the actual letter from Cyrus. So that's where we get the detail from then on of what he said was to happen. So we can clearly see that Cyrus found that letter. Yeah, and he reads it. And how does Darius react to this letter? So we go over and we turn over to Darius's decree. And we read that in chapter 6, verses 8 to 12 is the decree. So if we want to read there, Yvonne, from verse 8.
Verse 8 to 12.
Yep.
Moreover, make a decree that what ye shall do to the elders of these Jews for the building of this house of God, that the king's goods, even of the tribute beyond the river, for with expenses he given unto these men, that they be not hindered. And that which they have need of both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, and oil, according to the appointments of the priests which are at Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail, that they may offer sacrifices of sweet savour unto the God of heaven, and pray for the life of the king and of his sons. Also I have made a decree, that whosoever shall alter this word, let timber be pulled down from his house, and being set up, let him be hanged thereon, and let his house be made a dunghill for this. And the God that hath caused this name to dwell there destroy all kings and people that shall put there to their hand to alter and to destroy this house of God which is at Jerusalem. I, Darius, made a decree, let it be done with speed.
So he didn't mince words here. He wanted you to go and do exactly what they said. So we go on there, and then it says there that the Samaritans, they went and did exactly what he said. They went away, they didn't stop them, and it went and started on with good force and fervour to get built. And they got and built, they ended up building the foundation of the actual temple. So, do you have anything to add there, Anthony, for this one? So, or Yvonne, have you got anything you might want to add? Now's a good time. Because here we're sort of seeing we've got the first decree, we've got the second decree, and then we can move on to what the third decree. But what we found, because I know we're running out of time, that at this time here they went on with fervour, but again they had a restriction where the people would start to go against them. And we can see that we know that the Samaritans, and I always felt that they wanted to take that temple for themselves, to be able to, if they weren't going to do it, they could do it themselves and have their own temple. Because that spot is very important. It's so important that nowadays, what's on that spot where the temple was now? It's a Muslim temple, isn't it? Muslim mosque is on top of the spot where the Temple of Jerusalem. So it's a renowned spot, and so they wanted to get that for themselves.
But on the other hand, I mean, if you think about it, look, Jerusalem is still the God's chosen nation at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they realized that how strong the kingdom of Jerusalem, only if they relied themselves, or only if they depended on God. And the reason why this is also how, if you look at the other perspective, in a religious perspective, that they don't want Jerusalem to be rebuilt. They want Jerusalem or Israelites to be held in captive, because if Jerusalem will be rebuilt, then this nation surrounding Jerusalem will be weakened. Why? Because this Jerusalem is very strong. Only when they rely on God. That's why in the Old Testament you always see Jerusalem and Israelites getting into captivity because they sinned, they disobeyed God, they get into captivity, they ask for forgiveness, God take them out of captivity, now they become strong again, then they sin, and then they become captive again. So you can see all this cycle.
Yeah.
Right? And so the devil really wants to put a stop to it. That's why he did that in Cyrus' time, which he made it successful. So Cyrus stopped it. And then now Darius made a decree again, and it's almost like he's really bold in it. It's like, look, if you're gonna hinder this, I'm gonna pull out the timber from your house, and you will be hanging that. That's right. So there's a boldness to it, but at the end we believe, we know that based on the scripture, that the work has stopped again.
Yeah. So I made a mistake too. I said that because the foundation was actually built on the first decree, they actually did the foundation. The second one here, it clearly says they actually went forth and built, and they did complete it. So if we read Ezra Chapter 6, verse 14 and 15, please, Anthony, could you read them for me?
And the elders of the Jews builded, and they prospered through the prophesying of Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo. And they builded and finished it according to the commandments of God of Israel, according to the commandments of Cyrus and Darius and Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And this house was finished on the 3rd day of the month of Adar, which was in the 6th year of the reign of Darius the king.
So it was completed. So that the rebuilding was completed. But is the decree completed?
No.
No.
The decree is not completed because the physical part's been done, but now they need to be restored as a nation. They need to have political power. They need to be that entity again. And that doesn't happen here. However, if we go over into chapter 7, we can see there that talks about during the reign of Artaxerxes. And it doesn't really set us up on how we come to this point. But it was in a time, and Artaxerxes, he was reigning. This happened in around 547 BC. That's wrong. It has to be less.
457 Artaxerxes.
Yeah, so Artaxerxes here was 515, 457 BC. Well, it's actually 457 because that's the actual decree. So in 457 BC, I actually dyslexic on my own paperwork, that's why I'm thinking that's strange. So 457 BC, this is when another decree came out. So if we read here in chapter 7, you'll see, just reading on chapter 7, it talks about how Ezra, the son of Sariah, and the son of Azariah, and the son of Hilkiah, the son of Shalem, the son of Zadok, and the son of Ayatab, the son of Amariah, the son of Azariah, and the son of Meraioth, and the son of Zahariah, and the son of Uzi, and the son of Baki, and the son of Abishua, and the son of Phinehas, and the son of Eleazar, and the son of Aaron. So he shows his lineage all the way back to Aaron. So he was a appropriate priest, but it says here that he was of the law of Israel as well. So he studied the law. So the whole point of this, it was to bring in the things. So it says Ezra went up from Babylon, and he was a ready scribe in the law of Moses, which the Lord God of Israel had given, and the king granted him all his requests according to the hand of the Lord of his God upon him. So he was going there with looking at the state of the nation, where we're going to take the law of God forward. Because if it's not the law of God, what is it? It's the law of the world. And this here, specifically, this nation had to have the law of God. And this is where Ezra went up. So he went up, and this is where he went up to Artaxerxes. And in Artaxerxes, he understood this, and he realized that this is true. And he was obviously impressed by God to go forth and to give him this authority. And this is where finally the Israel nation, the Jews, were released from captivity. They were back to be a fully fledged nation again. And we can read that there from in his letter, which starts in Ezra chapter 7, verse 11, going onwards. So from 11 right through to 26 is that letter, and it explains how it sets up the law, and the magistrates, and all those things that's required to run a government. Now, there's a lot more here that we could go into, but we've run out of time. So we'd like to thank you for joining us for doing this study with us. As you can see, there's some wonderful detail here. But we can finally see that if we weigh all these things up together, we find that it's only this final decree is when everything was complete. And it's the only thing that we can go on from there. There's also a time when Nehemiah later on goes on to go and complete some of the work as well, which is after this point in time. But what it ends up being is just a continuation of what Artaxerxes had already put in place. And when Nehemiah did present the case that he's saying that there was problems with the walls and stuff like that, that he had no problem to send him off to go and complete that. that's probably another study again, or no, we can do that in another future study. There's so much more we wanted to cover, but I'd like to thank Pastor Yvonne for your help.
Thank you
and
for having me.
Anthony for your help as well.
Thank
And
you.
I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that you enjoyed this lesson and that you'll come and join us again next week, where we'll open up some more of the pages of Daniel so we have more of an understanding to sort of get down to the nitty-gritty to see what it means to us to be part of God's church in these days. So thank you for joining us, and happy Sabbath. Goodbye.
Sabbath.